and the more we can be informed, the more we can go out there and be advocates for our friends and family and just all the members of the Asian American Pacific Islander community, and just be better people. The news is horrific. It's absolutely, I have to say, I'm having trouble getting my head around it. That like, we know there's the insidious discrimination is there, but I'm having trouble getting my head around this insanity that could be started. It's just like this need to vent hatred and target a group is, and the fact that a lot of it came from our ex president is just really, it's one of the hardest things to get your head around, that I think I've experienced from the Trump administration. And I just think it's devastating. So we are really honored to have Win Kong come and speak to us today. I happen to catch, Win does these FaceTime lives once in a while, and I happen to catch one and hear her speaking about her perspective of the situation and some stats to back up the discrimination and what's actually going on with Asian Americans in our country today. You guys, I think a lot of you know Win because she's very big in the grassroots community. She's important, very important to New Jersey. She is the founder of AT&J and AT&J's sister C3, the AT&J Education Fund. She's a Vietnamese immigrant. She has been honored for her organizing work with few awards. One, she's a recipient of a We Are Emily Award from Emily's List. She received the Evangelina Menendez Trailblazer Award. She, from Senator Menendez, it's in honor of his mother. She, the Breaking Barriers Award, the Community Service Award from the American Muslim Council. And she serves on this currently, besides being the founder and executive director of AT&J, she serves on the steering committee of Rising Stars, the Eagleton Institute. She's on Governor Murphy's Diversity and Inclusivity Council. And she was a speaker at the 2018 and 2019 Women's Marches, and has had, and March for Our Lives. And she's had many media appearances and articles published, including in the New York Times. I'm sorry, she's been interviewed in the New York Times, New Jersey Globe, Insider New Jersey, WNYC, etc. We're really excited that so many of you come here to hear her unique perspective. Without me talking too much more, I'd like Win to take it. Just a couple of notes. Please mute yourselves and put your questions in the chat room, and we will have a Q&A. If Win wants you to just unmute at any point, you can just let us know. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Kathy. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. I know it's a Wednesday night, it's late, it's rainy. You guys want to just chill out for the night, but the fact that you guys showed up tonight means a lot to me. I was chatting to Eileen earlier, who's also part of the AAPI community, and she's also excited to be here. So a lot of what I'm going to cover might be intuitive to you guys, but I'm a visual learner, so I have a lot of slides to go through. They're not going to be very long. You know, do pop in a question anytime you have. At the bottom of your screen, the last icon is reactions. If you have a question for Q&A, click on the raise hands so that we see you and we can get your questions. I'd like to have like a conversation after I present some just fundamental stuff to you guys, if that's okay. I like to engage. I've been to a lot of Zooms, and you guys have too, and you get tired of just being talked at for an hour. That's not going to happen. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and then you guys can see. By the way, this is being recorded. Eileen, right? We're recording this, or you can hit record right now. If we get Zoom bombed, and I have been Zoom bombed before, we're going to stop the event, and then we'll send the recording to the FBI. That's happened to me before. So just watch out on that one. I think we've vetted everyone who's registered pretty well, but you know, in today's age, you never know what's going to happen. So I have two organizations that I founded in 2016, Action Together New Jersey, and then which is a 501c4. We're a civic organization. We do a lot of legislation. So if you used the ballot drop boxes, we did that. If you use Track My Ballot user portal, we did that. We also wrote the Ballot Cure Act, so you're familiar with our work. AT&J Education Fund, that's just year-round voter education, because you guys know, right? We have twice yearly, at least twice yearly statewide elections every year. Some places have also special elections, fire, school, etc. So voting and voting infrastructure is nonstop for New Jersey. We do not get a year off. So our county election officials never get a year off. So that's my work. So let me just go through this really quick. So a little bit about my family. We're Vietnamese. We immigrated here in 1979. We are part of the boat people. If you guys recall, the boat people from Vietnam back in the 70s, right after the Vietnam War. This is pre-COVID, obviously, for a family reunion. My father is a physician. He just retired like 5 years ago. We're from the Midwest. I've been to 49 states, but I consider myself a Midwesterner. So Ohio, he lives in Indiana, and that's my youngest daughter there. And then my work in the resistance and in this whole movement really started with the 2016 election. This was us right before we went to vote, and they were in the booth with me. We made that sign. My work really hit the ground running in 2017 with the governor's race. And so we worked 18 out of 21 counties to get him elected. I also work at the federal level a lot with our US senators, and I've been to many events. My idol is Elizabeth Warren, and I had predicted that Joe would be our next president. Here's the blue wave, and you guys were part of that. So if you guys remember, I had Post-it Posse, and many of you, Corrine, Katia, Kathy, you guys did part of that aspect too. So you guys were definitely part of what we've been doing for 4 years now. This is our 5th year. Most importantly, though, I work at the state level, do a lot of our legislation because, you know, our lives are dependent on a lot of the laws passed at the state level. And if you guys have seen the voting laws that's being passed through the different state legislatures in the different states, that point has really been driven home. So my representatives are Mila Jacey and former Governor Dick Cody. He's my senator. And Laura Wangberg, you know, she's just a lion in the Senate. I really love her. My work really affects really regular people because we're a volunteer driven group. And actually, this is my 5th year founding a nonprofit, and I just got my first paycheck last month. So it's a struggle, but we're in it to make a difference, right? So the work that I do involves over 1,000 volunteers all across the state, from way up north to way down south on the last exit. Anyone who can join in our work, we welcome. We also did the census, and while it was in the census, it occurred to me, that's when this was in 2020, when we really had to tell people, if they're immigrants, not to worry about filling out that census, because there was a lot of rhetoric about if you're documented or undocumented. And then looking at it further, we saw that Asians living in hard to count areas were really high statewide. This is an example of in the South where that's an issue. So I was wondering, you know, what's going on with the AAPI community that would cause such hard to count numbers. So let's just start with AAPI and the countries of origin. What does it mean, AAPI? As you can see here East Asians, I'm not sure if it's, can you guys see this okay? Thumbs up if you can. You can read it, awesome. So East Asians are really, you know, typical, I was trying to find a map so you guys could see it, but I couldn't find one, I didn't have time to make it, but Korea, Japan, China. South Asians are Bangladesh, for example, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, which I've been to. That's really lovely. It's probably one of my favorite places on earth. Southeast Asians are a group that I belong in, which is Vietnam, again, like I said, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. I think on this list, I've been to all of them except for Burma and Brunei. Pacific Islanders are, actually, this is including Hawaii, which was new to me, but it's Polynesia, including native Hawaiians, Samoan, and etc. So that's really your AAPI community. The demographics of AAPI, and this is, again, we're going to get new data when the census comes out, but this is from the 2018 American Community Survey. I don't know if you guys know, but the census actually does yearly, actually every day they say they're doing some type of census work. But there's about 8.8 million people of East Asian descent, 7.8 million of Southeast Asian, 5.5 of South Asian, and then we have a much smaller number of native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. So what do we know about the AAPI community? So this is probably the fourth talk I've given on AAPI, and it's been centered around the violence, but I find that I tend to go from we fear what we don't know, and in absence of knowledge, you know, you can fill that with a lot of myths and a lot of fear-based ideas of others, right? And so what I want you to know, and what I need your help on, is when you're talking to other people in the community, is to actually give them some facts about AAPI. So professionally, in the corporate or white collar world, AAPI are less likely than any other race, including Blacks and Hispanics, to be promoted into management. And Asian related programs in the corporate world that we see is really geared to cultural inclusion, but not management diversity. And so what I said repeatedly is Asians are seen as your worker bees. You know, we're the smart, industrious worker bees, but we're not really seen as upper management or executive level. And one of the striking things as we've gone as a nation through this whole racial equity, social justice, was a tweet that said, name the grade you were in when you had your first Black teacher. And overwhelmingly, Twitterati anyways, said, I really didn't have a Black teacher, or it wasn't until I was in college or something that I had a Black teacher. Well, I think what's similar to that is, how many of you have had an Asian American CEO or president or any C-level suite executives? There's just not that many. In the law profession, and this is of interest to many of you here on this Zoom webinar, is that greater than 10% of grads in the top 30 law schools are AAPI. However, they have the lowest ratio of partners to associates and the highest rate of attrition, and that's in the law profession. In finance, I looked at Goldman Sachs in particular because they're the big ones. Their workforce is predominant, actually overrepresentative with AAPI, 27%, 1 in 4. Yet, as far as US executives and senior managers, it's 1 in 10, and it's 0 at the executive level. And so you see that again and again in the finance sector. Federal workforce, so thinking about the federal level, again, AAPI are really overrepresented as far as a percentage of the overall population at nearly 10%, but at the highest level, it's only 4.4%. And let's look at small businesses. Now, this is an area where was really interesting to me, and this is something that you guys, all of us would identify with, is that we see that I see several several mistakes there, sorry. AAPI are most likely to own their own businesses. Interestingly, foreign-raised AAPI were more likely to be self-employed than US-raised AAPI. I would love to dig deeper into that to see if there's any cultural ramifications or anything like that. There's actually 1.9 million AAPI-owned businesses, a 40% increase. These businesses employ 3.6 million workers, and their payroll is $110 billion a year. So they do employ a lot of your businesses, your hair salons, your dry cleaners, your restaurants, a lot of, Main Street shops. So let's look at AAPI and COVID. As you know, frontline workers have been heroically bearing the brunt of it. 500,000 of AAPI women are in restaurants, food services, salons, dry cleaning, and other personal care services. Interestingly, 1.2 million AAPI are in the food supply chain, and 2/3 of that are immigrants. So you're talking about, farm to factory to grocery stores. That was a striking number to me. So we've seen, for example, in Nebraska, where we had a lot of COVID infections, and it hit the AAPI immigrant community quite a bit. In healthcare, this was really interesting to me, is that 1 in 5 physicians and surgeons are AAPI, and 1 in 11 nurses are. And I think this bears out where, and I think this piece of information needs to be investigated, why such a large percentage of Filipino American nurses have died from COVID. I would love to have, some university do research there. But take a look at this graph here as far as the AAPI share of all healthcare workers. If you look at New Jersey, look at that, 13.3%. That's a really large number. Hawaii, obviously, as a percentage of the population, that makes sense to me. California is a big one. California, we have huge communities. For example, the Vietnamese community of California is rather large. So that's expected, but New Jersey really jumped out at me. I had no idea that was the case. So we've looked at federal, we've looked at corporate, small business, and let's look at the nonprofit sector. So nonprofits fit a space that corporate and the government and private businesses do not serve. That's why we have nonprofits, right? They meet the needs of constituency that typically are minority constituencies. So this is where we see systemic inequity in the AAPI nonprofit sector. And this is startling to me. As far as funding, AAPI-led or AAPI-targeted constituency handled by nonprofits, out of every $100 that's given in grants, only 20 cents goes to AAPI communities. And this is something that's my personal struggle. There's, it's hard, number one, to start a new nonprofit, but number two, you know who you know. And I don't know a lot of C-suite level executives. I've been a stay-at-home mom for 20 years now. So guess who I know? Other moms. So it's hard to break that barrier, I have to say. So let's look at the high network and net worth. and high poverty duality that we see here. So if you look at the median household income by race in the last 12 months, and this is number from the 2016 as the latest from the community survey, again, by the census, Asians are the highest at nearly 77,000. Next up is white by 59,000, the lowest being Black or African American by race. Okay, so this is, I'm sorry, this is really bugging me. So let me just change this really quick. There you go. Let's look at the duality of the poverty. If you look at the poverty rates here, the Asian is in blue, white is in brown. Without the adjustment is, there's a little gap, but with the adjustment is a much bigger gap here. How is it that Asian Americans can have the highest median income, but also exceeding that of whites, but also have a much higher poverty rate? Why is that dichotomy? So if we break it down, it's by a country of origin. It's also by immigration status. How long have they been here since they've immigrated? How many generations, for example? How many years? So there's a lot of things into that. And we've seen this again and again, that, for example, Hispanics are not a monolith. Black or African American are not a monolith. The same thing can be said about Asian Americans, AAPI in general. Given the list of countries that I mentioned, you guys can understand why that's so. But if you look here, and this bears, at all data, anytime you look between, I would say anytime from 2000 forward, about these countries of origins bear out what the income is, depending on what country of origin you're from. So this is why we see that disparity. And there's a lot more data I can present, but I just didn't want to spend all night talking about data. But overall, you can see that Asian Indians, which are considered South Asians, Taiwanese, who are East Asians, tend to be the two highest median income, regardless of whatever study or data that you can see. What we've seen is a lot of Pacific Islanders typically are the lowest as far as median incomes. They lag on every data piece that I've looked at. And then Southeast Asians, from which I belong in, is somewhere in the middle. So how can you make a difference? Well, if you guys are in a hiring position, if you're in a decision-making role, you can make a huge difference. I would say be intentional. Be intentional. By that, I mean, and we've heard this again and again, Black Lives Matter, let's go beyond the hashtag, same thing that I would say. No one here hates Asians, right? So we can carry Stop Asian Hate. And at the same time, we can commit to doing really concrete things. So for those of you in decision-making roles, certainly in hiring positions, if you serve on a board, I would say recruit, hire, and promote AAPI. That is the most direct way you can really make a change in the systemic inequity. You can fundraise, or financially back AAPI. That's another direct way to really break through systemic inequity. Again, we're talking about the systemic or structural inequity, right? Lastly, if you're not in that position, like I'm not in that position, right? You can connect, build relations, or outreach to AAPI. So one of the soft skills that I have, and what I'll do is someone will, because I have a lot of connections, I would say, you should talk to so-and-so. And it's those connections and relations, that is the connective tissue that we need to do in order to support AAPI, because you guys have heard this again and again. It's who you know. That's why those alumni networks of colleges pay off in such a big way. Oh, my son is good at this. I'm going to submit his resume for this job, for example. We get that all the time. So you are who you surround with. So if you're not surrounded by Black people or AAPI or Hispanics, and you really want to broaden and do your part to kind of break through the inequities that we have in our society, then you need to do the work of, at minimum, making those connections and building those relationships and giving them, because you know what? I get so much help from people who say, hey, you should talk to Wynn. She really knows about vote by mail. And that's really all I need, right? I can't, like when I started this, I couldn't call Governor Murphy. I didn't have his number. So I had to work my way around and figure out how I can, leverage those relationships to get what I needed to do. So be intentional in that, in everything that you do. Be an ally, which is what you guys are. And you guys are so great at it. I'm so appreciative. You guys showed up, and that's fantastic. Given all the things that you guys have going on in your life, given the society as we are right now, and with the Chauvin trial and Easter and spring break, the fact that you guys are here, that's fantastic. If you are in an arena where a comment is made that is racist, bigoted, or whatever, speak up when it's, be sure that it's safe to do so, not to your own personal risk, I would say. And lastly, pass the mic. A lot of you have the opportunity to hold the mic, so to speak, right? So it's what Kathy did. She has the mic, but she passed it on to me tonight so that I could speak with you. So that's how she was an ally to me. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's how you guys can do it. So here's how you guys can make a difference. I'm going to ask for donations if I'm not worth my salt as an executive director, if I don't. But we do have tax deductible C3, which is nonpartisan, just voter education. And then we have the C4, which is non-tax deductible, but that's where I do all my legislation. And I don't know, you guys know, but we have early voting here in New Jersey. That was a lot of work. And the work that I did specifically was, I actually didn't write this bill. It was written by Assemblyman Zwicker, but I had worked with Senator Gill on her early voting bill. I got them to commingle and come together on one bill. And when it came to me, it said, we'll have early voting with voting machines. And so that's your regular push button machines where you push the button for candidate A, but you don't know if recorded your vote as candidate A, right? A lot of things can happen. So I worked with Professor Apple at Princeton University on the language to ensure that we got voting machines that had hand-marked paper ballots that can be read by optical scanners and verified by the voter. So what that means is you, the voter, are hand marking your ballot. You feed it through an optical scanner. It records your vote. You get a receipt of sorts that says you voted for candidate A, C, and F. And you can verify, yes, in fact, I voted for A, C, and F. And one great thing about this new technology is that for overvotes, where it says, for example, pick 2 candidates and you picked 3, the machine will tell you and you get to fix it. You get, before you leave the voting place, it actually, when they give you the paper to verify it, you can actually say, it'll say you voted for 3, vote for 2, and then you strike out the one that you don't want. So we just got that actually yesterday. for early voting. So we're so proud of that work. So a lot of the work is done in the shadows with phone calls and emails and texts, a lot of negotiations. You don't get what you want all the time, but we get it done. So with that, that is my presentation. I'm so thankful that you guys tuned in and listened. And I'm happy to take on any questions that you guys may have. All right. I'm just catching up on the chat right now. So Eileen and Kathy, if you want to, let's see here. Okay. So there's a question from Stephanie Silvera. Hi, Dr. Silvera. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Hey, listen, by the way, I don't know if you guys know, but Stephanie is an epidemiologist at Montclair State University. She was just on WNYC. Kudos to you. It was great work. I caught it in the car while I was grocery shopping. So thank you so much. How are you and what's your question?
No, I was just saying in reference to your comment about Filipino nurses in particular, and how there's a history of the United States going and particularly training Filipino nurses and then bringing them to the United States. And so there's a very interesting history there of sort of US imperialism, as we see in so many other places. And then ultimately that being to the detriment of that community, as we've seen during COVID. So I thought it was very interesting that you brought that up. And I was trying to somewhere dig out my brain of the person who had done that research. I think somebody else mentioned it though. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. So I'm wondering with the Filipino nurses here in New Jersey in particular, if there is an overrepresentation of the 1 in 11 AAPI of that, what part of that 11% or 9%, sorry, are Filipino nurses?
That's interesting. Annie Chung posted something here, a link. Annie, do you want to tell us what that link's about? Unmute yourself and tell us.
Hi, sorry. Actually, she had written about a program that had started. I'm not sure. It was way back when, and it is linked to some of the imperialist history with the Philippines. But part of that history included a training program they brought to the Philippines, where they tried, because they had an underrepresentation of healthcare workers in the U.S., and so they trained them and brought them to the U.S. So I think I'm not really sure percentage-wise how much they represent of the Asian Americans you cited, but certainly that's an important part. And I'm sure many of us have anecdotes of Filipino nurses we've worked with ourselves in New Jersey.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Annie.
When just to segue out, and this may be a really stupid question, but because I think that we've all been, I'm going to admit that I have, historically been much more focused when it came to violence and on the Black Lives Matter situation and people and people, members of the Black community. And I know that that you in those acts of violence you're charged with a hate crime. I'm wondering if these acts against Asian Americans, if these perpetrators are being also likewise charged with hate crimes.
So,
and just to add to that, like if you have any idea what the incident, are there any numbers behind how the incidents have increased, proportionally? So
I know the incidents in hate crimes in AAPI has increased 1,400%.
Wow.
The Atlanta mass shooting is not being charged as a hate crime yet that I know. I know that Attorney General Rule was on a panel, and he said that the standard for a hate crime is a higher standard and a bunch of legal jargon that I really didn't understand. But it's not as cut and dry as we think about it, as we think. So I think it remains to be seen, the investigation that's going on and what's going to happen there. There's a question by Kathy in the chat room. Kathy, if you want to unmute and say your question, that would be great.
Yes, I'd like to know, how can we get the Asian community to organize itself better? We're all dispersed and we don't know what our demands are. we're not as organized as Black Lives Matter. We don't have a demand. We just say, stop the violence. What can we ask our legislators to do to help us stop this violence?
So if you guys, so I've been a BLM member for my community for 5 years now. So I've marched with them, I've helped them organize, I've been to meetings. I've been to meetings where we taught our community of Morristown what BLM was. This was going back to 2016, 2017, because there was a lot of misconceptions about it. It requires education. So BLM just didn't start last year. And it was not a cohesive movement, actually. There's BLM, the organization, and then there's Black Lives Matter, the movement, which are two different things, really. So when you're donating to Black Lives Matter, the organization is different than when you're marching for Black Lives Matter, the movement. So it's not as cut and dry as we think. However, they do have a good hashtag. But I have to say, Asians in general, as far as the race discussion and the binary paradigm here in the United States, it remains a Black and white conversation for which other people of color, to which Asians are a subset of, are basically seen as, we're not even in the conversation at all. So there's that part. The other part too is Asian Americans, depending on their country of origin and when they immigrated and which country they immigrated from, in which time, it really frames how they think from a political perspective. So let me give you an example. I can speak about Vietnamese Americans, right? Vietnamese Americans come from the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. You guys know the Vietnam War. We tried to bring forth democracy. Vietnamese American of an older generation, so they're now in their 70s, are very conservative. They're huge Republicans and they're big Trump supporters. Younger Vietnamese Americans who were not affected by the Vietnam War and Ho Chi Minh and communism and socialism of Vietnam, they're much more progressive and liberal. So there's an age strata even within the Vietnamese Americans. And then if you want to break it down even further, the ones that immigrated here in the 70s versus the ones who immigrated in the 50s. So that's just one community within AAPI. But if we are to paint with a broad brush, Asian Americans are typically the least politically engaged. And part of that is the country of origin. You're not supposed to speak out to your government about the government because you were persecuted prior. Your parents were, your grandparents were. So there's generations of, we don't talk about, that's not what we talk about, the dinner table, right? There's also, depending on which area, which country you came from, it really forms your worldview of freedom and, you know, politics and all of that. But I would say that in general, the younger generation, regardless of the country of origin that their parents are from, they tend to be more politically engaged. But we see that today here with the white, Hispanic, and Black communities as a whole. I think the younger people have inherited a society that they don't want to live in and they want to make changes, right? And I'm seeing that more than I do the silos of race. I have to say I'm one of the very few Asian Americans involved in politics in general. I feel very alone. You know, I don't see a lot of Asians, and I do feel you, Kathy. I try to get Asian Americans engaged, but you know, I'm lucky if they send a donation, but usually I don't even get that. It's like, oh, I don't do politics, but I think we all have family and friends who also give us that too, right? So I know we're in the bubble. I think that's the struggle that we have in general. All right, Stephen Lee, you had a question.
Lynn,
Do
can
you
I
want to
just say
unmute?
something to what you just said? I
Sure.
want to point out, did you see Kathy in Hackensack, the rally? Was it Hackensack or Fort Lee? But that was like 700 Asian Americans showed up, which was like shocking. And so I think that the momentum is there, and it's really is a question of just, you know, getting the word out, forming groups that can be, you can find a big organization to join, but you can make your own small organization and start keep the conversation going. But also, since Asians probably aren't as demonstrative overall, if you're going to throw it into to a large group like that, and maybe that, and not as political, I think that if you could, we could also do some sort of, you know, just join a writing campaign, just get really engaging, you know, through the same type of networking and building up community, et cetera, engaging them into writing, constantly writing to their legislators and writing letters to the editor, just becoming more vocal in that vein. That might be an easier thing. But I think now's the time. I think if you did it now, and there's a lot of reach out now amongst the community, churches, groups like that, and tried to focus on, you know, pre-existing groups and advocate them into more movement. I think it might be a good time.
The
And
turnout
target Asian legislatures also, like Andy Kim, who's just terrifically amazing.
he is.
Yeah,
He's so great.
I'm sorry.
The Fort Lee turnout was amazing. I think we would not have had that if we ourselves had not supported our Black brothers and sisters during the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think, you know, we did this with, remember when there was the Muslim ban? We stood for against.
We decided to leave.
Right? When with the immigrant community and children in cages, we marched alongside with our Hispanic brothers and sisters. I think we're just the last group to come along to be persecuted and attacked. And this is on top of, again, our 5th year, right? Of this horrible time in our nation's history where this is happening. So I think that we as Asian Americans don't have to do it ourselves. We don't have to shoulder it ourselves. We have so many allies because we have been allies for others. Stephen, I wanted to get to your question. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thank you for your remarks and your presentation tonight. And you know, to add to that, I think there's also a glimmer of hope, and I think it's the 37th legislative district where I think Councilwoman Ellen Kim is running for the assembly, and if elected would serve, I do believe, as the first Asian American woman to serve in the assembly. So crossing our fingers in that effort. It ultimately ties into my question and some of the observations and the data that you put forth tonight about AAPIs. Basically hitting that bamboo ceiling in management and in leadership and also in political office. And basically my question puts forth of the model minority myth and how that has contributed into a narrative that has put upon a ceiling on AAPIs advancing in management and leadership and in political roles.
I mean, that's a myth that on the surface looks like it's a positive thing, right? We're not the lazy ones. We're not the stupid ones. We're the best. Well, look at the Asians. Look how great that they've overcome and look how smart they are, right? But actually, if you saw the duality of wealth and poverty, there's more Asians living in poverty than there are otherwise. And so it has done a huge disservice. And we've heard this again and again. representation matters. When you don't see those AAPI in those, those occupations, in the office, in the corner offices, on the movie screen, culturally, we're just starting. I mean, Bling Empire is just, starting to really break out. We had Crazy Rich Asians, but I mean, even then we can see that it is the mixed Asian actors, the lighter skinned Asian actors, the ones that have more European features that have really broken through. That follows the history of Black actors, typically the ones that are mixed, the lighter skinned actors, if you look at our cinematic past. So I think that it's just going to take time for society to catch up to the images that we've seen. And I think anything that we can do to I mean, I have to say, with the Biden administration, is so much better than the Trump administration as far as diversity. However, I was very disappointed that there was not a cabinet level position. As those nominees were coming out, I was, looking for a Southeast Asian someone there, and I was disappointed not to see one, honestly. Karine, go ahead and unmute. Nope.
Hi, sorry, I was
Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm considering pretty well.
Good.
So I had two questions. I didn't get a chance to write my second question, but my first question was, how do we support and uplift the goals of people of color and or AAPI in very white communities with all white politicians and all white or mostly white businesses, especially within Democratic groups, where the Stop Asian Hate signs are very easy, but then what's next? Like, what do we do?
That's a hard one because that's a structural system that I'm trying to break through, right? You guys know that I'm well known. You heard my bio and cred. But I'm still known as the worker bee. When positions were open, I was not even considered. It went to other people when I did the work. The early voting signing happened. I wasn't invited, even though I literally rewrote and put in those optical scanners. I even worked to get the numbers from Dominion, that Dominion, to get the numbers but there was not enough seat at the table, apparently. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I would just say that if you are a decision maker, if you're an influencer in any way, do like Kathy, pass the mic. Hey, this is someone you should know. Let's have her or him come speak to us, follow them, fund them, volunteer for them, whatever it is. That's what it takes. And I don't know who that person is, but so many people have uplifted me. Like, I just give you an example, something so small. So there was an article and it was behind a paywall for the New Yorker. And, I subscribe to Washington Post, but I don't have the money to basically subscribe to everything. But one of my volunteers, Steve Stern from Southern New Jersey, who's one of our volunteers, emails me and said, Wynn, you had a post where you said, you're not a subscriber because you're behind a paywall. It was the New York Times, right? And he goes, I'm a subscriber. I get to invite 2 people for free. They get free subscriptions for a year. I would love to invite you. What's your email? Bing. That's not a lot of money for him, but it's expenditures for me. But he now just opened my whole world. Literally, he opened my whole world, and I can read behind a paywall now. And that's just such a small thing, no cost to him, right? But he thought about it, he took a step, and he did it. So I don't know how you approach the Democratic Party they are a machine.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, Corinne, you know that. You and I have had these conversations. Yeah.
But first of all, Wen, I just want to say, like, I love you so much. Like, I don't care who hears me. You are an amazing human being.
Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to throw that out there. And I just had a second part to my question real quick. I don't want to take up too much of anyone's time. So that was the next question. We were talking about representation. And a few years back in my district, we were supporting an AA candidate. And that was a wonderful thing. And like you were saying, it's very rare to see that in politics, right? Someone talked about District 37 now. So, okay, that's great. But, you know, from the advocacy work I'm doing, I'm finding that people of color aren't supporting progressive goals. So is it enough to have a person of color in office to get the work done? Like, you know, I don't need to bring up examples, but what do you do about that, right? Like, you know, me as a white woman, it's very hard to tell a person of color, like, okay, you're in office now. Why are you not doing the right thing? You know?
So, okay. With anyone that you help elect into office, you get the right as a constituent to absolutely hold their feet to the fire. Absolutely. You should say, you ran on this platform, but you failed so far to deliver. And you should do that. Absolutely. No doubt about it. There have been situations, and actually, you guys know Anna Wong, right?
Yeah.
My sister from another mother. Anna was my Northwest Regional Director, and she and Lexa are now in
Warwick.
That's right. I was disappointed because of another AAPI woman had disparaged or did something. I don't really recall, but I was like, well, this is a bummer. You know, there's so few of us with any type of a platform, and for her to come out like this, and she said something like, and I'm paraphrasing, she goes, "When same skin but not the same kin."
Ooh.
You know? Ooh. So that's stuck with me, that you could be on the surface very similar, but it doesn't mean they share your same values. And so I thought that's something that's resonated with me for a while. But you're asking the hard questions, Corinne, and it's, I would say, again, any elected officials hold their feet to the fire, whether or not they are a person of color or not.
Yeah.
They still have to follow through their campaign promises. They have to do what's right for the community, understanding that they're balancing the needs of the entire community. But they have to, you can disagree for sure, but they should be able to explain it in a way where you're like, okay, I understand, I disagree with your decision, but I can respect the forethought and deliberation into how you did it. So
if I could, if you don't mind, I just like to add to that, just to underscore what you said earlier, is that you're not monolithic, and Black people aren't monolithic, and Asian people aren't monolithic. So you do have to really, you know, do due diligence on the person's background and ethics, and like you said, hold them accountable. I also, just to go back to another question, something that occurred to me, you know, and actually this goes back to how the Republicans and the Federalist Society, I just thought of that model in the sense of that if Asian Americans and people on this call, you know, started to reach out and form a group and form something, maybe reach out to Andy Kim or one of the other more powerful Asian American leaders, and start to form something where you cultivate this connection, you cultivate future Asian American leaders to put them into the lane for politics, and use networking.
So Andy Kim, actually, after last week's panel, he formed a PAC, a political action committee, to recruit and train AAPI to run for office. So That's
exactly it.
something that, you know, he's doing. And so I think it's great, great that he's doing that.
So I would say that the people on this call, that particularly the Asian Americans that want to get involved, if you want to connect with each other, shoot me an email and let me know, and I will put you all in contact with each other. And just to Wynn's point too, I want to stick this in just in case before we run out of time. I see there are more questions. Yeah, Dr. Stephanie Silvera amazingly did a terrific presentation for us when it came to Hispanic Americans and Latin Americans, and it was a lot of parallels, and including the fact that they were not monolithic. I remember that particularly. And the other thing I want to mention is that when Wynn did do a tremendous amount of work for the ballot in New Jersey and for early voting in New Jersey, anybody that was here and did a posted posse with us knows that we got we got our lists and our entire model to do it from her, and we have worked with our activism to for that same legislation. But I do think that when she talks about supporting Asian American leaders, AT&J is in New Jersey is a place to support Asian American leaders. So just wanted to make sure we drove that point home. Okay,
Thank
so
you
I'm
so
sorry,
much.
take it back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see Pam with her hand up and waiting patiently. Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, I want to say that a local couple, Yinging and Yu Sun, are going to have a Stop Asian Hate rally on April 10th in Ridgewood at Van Ness Square, and that's at 2 p.m. I think they just got the go-ahead today from the village.
Pam, will you make sure you share that with me, and we'll make sure we get that out there? And thank you. That's great.
Thank you for that.
Let's see, who else do we have on here?
I see your comments in the chat. Thank you so much. You guys are way too kind. I so appreciate the fact that you guys showed up. I love it.
Yeah.
I love the diversity of this group.
Yes. So I don't see any more questions particularly, and it is 8:30. And again, I want to thank Wynn for this great presentation. It's a lot of food for thought for all of us. We can connect and move forward and help out with this. For those of you who are new to this and are new to JOLT, we try to have these educational forums monthly, and we do a lot of get out the vote work when it comes near election season, including we wrote over 100,000 postcards in this last election season. We hosted phone banks and text banks. And yes, we did in 2018 do a lot of work and helped to get Senator Menendez elected. We actually ran Get Out the Vote from out of my house for this area, which was insane. So
I remember all of that, Kathy.
Yes, Terry, a lot of people on this call were here doing that. So
yes, and Wynn, oh my goodness. I was really on top of it with postcards, post-it posse.
Wynn is definitely a mentor and
yes.
a leader, and yeah, I'm happy to have her here. Unfortunate that what provoked it, but really happy to have her here. Thank you very much.
So listen, I just want to thank you so much for your participation and for showing up, for those of you, and for those of you seeing this on recording. Thank you so much for watching. I really implore all of you to just find that one thing that you can do. It may not happen tomorrow or next week, but you might come upon a situation where you could really give someone a hand, and you just never know. I get graces from people like you would not believe. People are so kind to me to reach out, but then I'm not shy about asking for help either. You can't be shy when you're running a volunteer organization, right? But I'm just so grateful for Kathy for passing the mic, because Kathy has a great platform, and for her to reach out to me several times and make time and put it on the calendar and to give me this ability to talk to you guys, I'm really appreciative. So thank you so much, Kathy. And thanks to everyone for joining me tonight. I so appreciate it.
Thank you. I see a book recommendation in the chat also by Stephanie Silvera. She gave us a ton last time too. Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong. Great. And we'll post that rally, Pam, and let me know if you want to connect and support AT&J, support Wynn's work. And look, Jersey is leading. We early voting. I mean, come on,
Yes.
we are democracy. So
That's
there you
huge. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Have
guys.
a great night.
go. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Miss all your faces. Bye.